The bell above the cafe door rang softly as a rush of cold December air slipped inside, carrying with it the faint smell of snow and wet wool. And for a brief moment every sound seemed to pause, the clink of porcelain cups, the low hum of Christmas jazz, the muted laughter of well-dressed patrons wrapped in scarves that probably cost more than a month's rent for someone else, before life resumed as if nothing had happened. The girl stood just inside the doorway, her thin coat pulled tightly around her small frame, fingers red from the cold, eyes wide as they adjusted to the golden glow of hanging lights and the towering Christmas tree near the window, heavy with ornaments and promises she had learned long ago not to expect. Her shoes were worn at the soles, her scarf frayed, but she had tried her best to look neat, smoothing her hair back with nervous hands as if effort alone could erase the truth of where she came from. She hadn't come for luxury or comfort. She had come because the cold outside had become unbearable, and because, for once, she wanted to sit somewhere warm, even if just for a few minutes, even if she ordered nothing more than a cup of hot water. The cafe was full, nearly every seat taken by people chatting, scrolling phones, or staring out at the snow like it was a decoration put there just for them. And her heart sank a little as she realized there might be no place for her at all. Then she saw it, a small table near the window, half hidden by the Christmas tree, with two chairs, one empty and one occupied by a man sitting alone. He wore a simple dark coat, well-fitted but not flashy, his posture calm, his gaze distant as he slowly stirred a cup of coffee. He seemed to have forgotten to drink. There was something about him that made him seem separate from the rest of the room. Not lonely exactly, but quiet in a way that suggested a heavy mind. And the girl hesitated, feeling the familiar weight of doubt pressing on her chest. People like her didn't usually sit next to people like him. She had learned that lesson in 100 unspoken ways, looks that lingered too long, whispers that followed her down aisles, security guards who watched her like she was already guilty of something. She considered turning around, stepping back into the cold, telling herself she didn't belong here, but the ache in her feet and the emptiness in her stomach pushed her forward. Slowly, carefully, she walked toward the table, each step echoing louder in her head than it did on the cafe floor. The man didn't notice her at first, still lost in thought, until she stopped beside the empty chair and cleared her throat, the sound barely audible over the music. He looked up then, surprised, his eyes meeting hers, and for a second she almost apologized just for existing in his space. Swallowing hard, she gestured to the chair and asked in a soft but steady voice, "Excuse me, is this seat only for the rich?" The words came out before she could stop them, shaped by years of quiet humiliation and careful observation, and the question hung between them like fragile glass. Around them the cafe continued as usual, but in that small space time seemed to slow. The Christmas lights reflecting in the window behind them like 1,000 watching eyes. The man blinked, clearly not expecting the question, and glanced at the chair as if seeing it for the first time, then back at her face, where embarrassment and courage wrestled openly. He noticed the way she stood, not fully relaxed, ready to retreat at the first sign of rejection, and something in his expression softened, a faint crease forming between his brows. For a moment she feared he would laugh, or dismiss her, or call a waiter to remove her, and memories flashed through her mind, being told to wait outside shops, being shooed away from benches, being made to feel like warmth was a privilege she hadn't earned. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her worn bag, and she prepared herself for disappointment, because disappointment at least was familiar. Instead, the man slowly pushed his chair back, stood up slightly and spoke in a calm, even voice that carried just enough warmth to cut through her fear. "It's just a seat," he said, looking directly at her, not above her, not past her. "And it doesn't belong to money. Please, sit." The simplicity of his answer stunned her more than cruelty ever could, and she hesitated, unsure if she had heard him correctly. I won't bother you," she said quickly, already half apologizing again, and he shook his head gently, a small smile touching his lips. "You're not bothering me," he replied, pulling the chair out for her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As she sat down carefully, as if the chair might disappear beneath her, warmth spread through her body, not just from the cafe, but from the unexpected kindness of being seen as equal, if only for a moment. Outside, snow began to fall more heavily, dusting the windows in white, and inside the cafe, beneath the glow of Christmas lights and the quiet hum of comfort, two strangers shared a table, unaware that this simple question, asked by a poor girl with nothing to lose, was about to change both their lives forever. The girl sat stiffly at first, her hands folded in her lap as if she were afraid they might touch something too clean, too expensive, while the warmth of the cafe slowly thawed the cold that had settled deep into her bones. And the man across from her watched her quietly, not in the way people usually watched her, with suspicion or pity, but with a thoughtful calm that made her uneasy in a different way. For a few moments neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the soft crackle of a nearby heater and the distant laughter of a group celebrating near the counter, and she wondered if she should say thank you again, or stand up and leave before she overstayed whatever kindness he had offered. A waitress approached their table then, her expression polite but cautious, eyes flicking briefly to the girl's worn coat before returning to the man, and asked what they would like to order, already assuming the answer would come from him alone. Before the girl could open her mouth to say she didn't need anything, the man spoke gently. 2 hot chocolates. "Well, please," and the waitress paused, surprised, then nodded and walked away. The girl looked up at him, panic and gratitude mixing in her eyes. "Sir, I don't need," she began, but he lifted a hand slightly, stopping her with a kind firmness. "It's Christmas," he said simply. "Let me—" The words hit her harder than she expected, because Christmas had never been something given freely to her. It had always been something she watched from the outside, through windows like this one. As they waited, he asked her name, and when she told him, her voice barely above a whisper, he repeated it carefully as if committing it to memory, then offered his own, just a first name, nothing that hinted at power or wealth. She told him a little about herself in fragments, how her mother worked long hours, how school came second to survival, how she liked to read, because books made her feel like someone else for a while, and he listened without interrupting, without the impatient glances people usually gave when they thought a story wasn't worth their time. When the hot chocolates arrived, steam rising like a promise, she wrapped her hands around the mug, savoring the heat, and for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to smile, a small, cautious curve of the lips that looked like it hadn't been used often. The man noticed and smiled too, though there was a shadow behind his eyes, something unspoken that suggested he carried his own loneliness, his own regrets hidden beneath the calm exterior. As they talked, the cafe seemed to fade into the background, the Christmas music blending into a gentle blur, and the girl found herself forgetting to measure every word, forgetting to guard every emotion, because he wasn't looking at her like a problem to be solved or a charity case to be managed, but like a human being whose story mattered. At one point, she asked him why he was sitting alone on Christmas Eve, and for a moment his gaze drifted to the window, to the snow-covered street outside. Before he answered that, sometimes being surrounded by people didn't mean you weren't alone, a truth she understood far too well for someone so young. He asked her what she wanted for Christmas, and she laughed softly, a sound edged with disbelief, saying she didn't really want anything, but when he pressed gently, she admitted she dreamed of finishing school and working somewhere warm, somewhere she didn't feel invisible. The sincerity of her dream stirred something deep within him, a memory of a younger version of himself who had once believed success alone could fill every empty space. When he stood to leave, paying at the counter before she could protest, she felt a sudden rush of fear, like the moment was slipping away too fast, like the warmth and safety would vanish with him. He returned to the table, pulled a small card from his wallet, and placed it gently beside her mug. "If you ever need help with school," he said quietly, "call this number." She stared at the card, then at him, disbelief flooding her face. "Why?" she asked, the single word carrying years of mistrust and hard lessons. He met her gaze steadily and answered, "Because someone once gave me a seat when I thought I didn't belong." She didn't know then that the man sitting across from her was the CEO of a multinational company, a name known in boardrooms and headlines, a man who could change lives with a single signature. And maybe that was why the moment mattered so much, because kindness, when stripped of titles and wealth, felt real, uncalculated and pure. As he walked toward the door, pausing to hold it open for another customer, the girl clutched the card like it was something fragile and sacred, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear she wasn't sure how to handle. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside her chest, something had shifted. Something warm and new had taken root, and she understood, perhaps for the first time, that not every seat in the world was reserved for the rich, and that sometimes a simple question asked in a Christmas cafe could open a door she had never imagined walking through. If this story touched your heart, if you believe kindness still has the power to change lives, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because stories like these deserve to be told and heard by everyone.